Hi everyone, I'm BL Ochman and I welcome you to today's live hangout with the social media manager of NASA, the social media editor of the New York Times, with, I'm going to get this right, Natan Edelsberg of Muckrack and Ronnie Binzer, the Hangout helper, and we are here today to explain how these organizations have added Hangouts to their digital strategy, exactly what they're doing, and to answer your questions about having Hangouts in your digital strategy. We are being sponsored today by PRSA New York and Communications Week New York, which is a multidisciplinary communications event taking place this week, the first annual, created by Kite Hill PR. And we are thrilled that there are so many of you here today. As you may know, yesterday the iconic brand Tiffany did their first Hangout on air, brands including Cadbury, Pepsi, Toyota, H&M, so many of them in the top 100 largest brands have begun to incorporate Hangouts into their strategies. And, you know, there is a learning curve, we won't kid you, but as we explain to you today and answer your questions today, we think that maybe we can take a little bit of the scariness factor out of it. So let me start by introducing Sona Patel, who is the social media editor of the New York Times and who has produced a series of Hangouts for the Times dining section. And welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I would like to know, first of all, what prompted the beginning of the use of Hangouts? Was it just new technology or was there something else about it?
Yeah, so the New York Times started using Hangouts in like late 2011, early 2012 is when we produced our first one. And really, we were really intrigued by the opportunity to bring together our journalists and our readers in a live video format and sort of, see what the conversation would lead to. Our first Hangout was with two technology reporters and several participants, and the topic was Thanksgiving and technology, and how people were using technology during Thanksgiving. So bringing their devices into the kitchen, and also just the dynamic of being around older family members and having them come to you, for help using their mobile devices, and just some of the challenges around that. And then during that conversation, since it was our first Hangout, we really wanted to hear from our readers how they saw us using Hangouts as well. And so we got a lot of ideas from them. And we during these experiments we learned a lot about the benefits and the challenges. And the first time we used it, was a bit of a clumsy initial test, but
Everybody's are like that.
we went on to try about a dozen more conversations about politics and sports, the new healthcare law, and topics that we thought would yield lively discussions. And all of these videos were embedded on our blogs and really attempted to draw on these blogs' loyal audiences for participants. So that's pretty much how we got started, and that's sort of our strategy going forward is really kind of tapping into some of the niche audiences that the New York Times has attracted in some of its sections.
One of the things that you shared with us in the green room was that when the Times has produced Hangouts, they've been very produced, as if you were producing television interviews, and you mentioned that that may have taken some of the spontaneity out of it. And I think that Ronnie would address this as well, and that this is such a spontaneous medium, and it is different from television. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the differences will be going forward.
Yeah, so we've recently produced a series of Hangouts for the dining section around a feature called Recipe Lab, where a New York Times dining reporter, her name is Julia Moskin, would pick a cookbook and a recipe every month and ask readers to cook it. And then we would invite the cookbook author to join us for a Hangout, and then we would pick 4 or 5 home cooks to join that Hangout. And when we created the Hangout, we decided who the chef was going to be. I would go through a sort of producing or casting process, I guess, and I would pick my participants, and then we would ask them to do, I think it was like 2 rehearsals before the actual Hangout. And our last one was with, I can remember a recent one with Mario Batali, the chef, and so he was on the Hangout, and then we invited our home cooks to join, and we had just a conversation like this where we ran through everything that we were going to talk about, and it's sort of, those initial tests did very well. We had our home cooks talking about some of the things that they wanted to talk about during the chat, but then the next day when we actually did the live Hangout, it's like, you don't really remember all the things that you said and in what order. And your initial reaction of meeting Mario Batali on a Google Hangout was it was lost a little bit. And so it was hard to really replicate the spontaneity that we found during, or the spontaneity that we experienced during the test Hangout. So going forward, I think when we do Hangouts, we're really going to try to not make them as highly produced as they once were.
That's absolutely fascinating, really. We just have a comment here, and this is one of the things that distinguishes Hangouts from every other platform, and that is that we are able, during the broadcast, to bring up people's comments and to interact with them in real time. And Joya Bella, who I used to work with, actually, says, glad to hear that yours were even a bit clumsy, because it happens to everybody at the start, and everybody feels like it's only them. And they're talking about clumsy, goes New York City Sirens. So
yeah, exactly, right?
There's not a lot you can do about that. I'm here in Manhattan. So I would like to ask you, John Yembrick, to tell us about NASA's participation in Hangouts, which just knocked my little white cotton socks off when I see the space station astronauts and the Aquanauts, and they're underwater and they're doing Hangouts. I'm just beyond astounded by that. So can you explain a bit about your program, please?
Sure, no problem. And I have some slides too. But one of the interesting things about us is we have 10 NASA field centers across the country, and we have scientists and researchers all over the world, and some people, as you just mentioned before, that are living off the world. So what's interesting about us is we really try to find vehicles to connect those people to the public. What matters to us at NASA really on using Hangouts or other types of tools as well as engagement, where we can just be a space agency where there's a wall around us, or be like a broadcast where you're just only the news reporters get to interview astronauts and scientists and NASA administrator. We want the public to have that kind of access to our experts. And so when Google Plus Hangout came around, if you look at historically in communications, it was, people sit in front of their TVs, or before that their radios, and they watched the news. The news was presented to them, and now we want them participating in it. And so I have a few slides I want to go through, but to answer your question, I mean, we have a really complex digital strategy because we have over 450 social media accounts at the agency. We have a lot of people and a lot of people managing those accounts, and we find ways to take all of our missions and projects and programs and find ways to get them in front of the public so they know about them. Historically, NASA, you know what's happened when maybe something goes wrong at NASA, or there's a big event like a launch or a milestone, but you don't know what's happening, all these little technologies we're working on. You don't know what's happening when there's a smaller science missions being launched, and those things are just important to you in your life. It's just they don't necessarily make the front page of the newspaper. So if you don't mind, I just want to run through a few quick slides here, and I'll go through these fairly fast. Stand by while the technology carries it up.
Could you please mute your mic, Sona?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you mentioned this one right here is the underwater one we've done. We basically have done over, I think, about 45 Hangouts where we take questions from the media, from schools, libraries, the public. The things that we find are beneficial about it is we're allowed to put our experts up and give people direct access to those. You can make it a very visual experience. We can put up photographs, we can put up videos into the broadcast, and typically NASA has its own television station, but typically that requires a lot of resources, right? You have to have the TV video crew out there. You have to have a satellite access if you're doing something remote. And now all you need is good connectivity, and you can connect people from anywhere to our content. You mentioned also, BL, we've done a Hangouts from space, and our first one was last year. And what was cool about that was, if you think about it, I mean, you could take live questions. We use the hashtag AskAstro, and we took questions from all of our social media platforms, not just Google+, but also, you could be on Twitter, you could be on Facebook, you could be anywhere that, we were soliciting for questions. And if you think about how fascinating this is, really for the first time in history, you could be anywhere on the planet if you had internet access, and you could ask someone flying in space at 17,500 miles per hour, 250 miles above the planet. You could ask them a question and have it answered real time. I mean, we do other types of engagement. We do things like tweet chats and other types of engagement with people on space station. We just did one recently where people submitted YouTube questions. But this is a real live experience where you're giving people access to people in space, which before was something reserved only for the few, only for maybe a few media reporters that got to ask questions when those opened up. So we find it something really a cool way to engage our content with the world. And so we did our first.
To interrupt you quickly, but we actually had a question that was
Go ahead.
That Mirna Greenfeld asked, how do you use other social media like Twitter and Facebook? And you touched upon that briefly, but basically for this, Twitter and Facebook were heavy platforms to help promote this, correct?
Yes. So we're promoting something. We don't. We try to keep the full fleet of our social media tools available, and because we want to hit as many users as possible. Our audience at NASA isn't just one or two demographics. We really want to hit everybody. We feel like we have a story that connects with everybody on the planet. You just got to get in front of them. So if someone's on Twitter, we don't want to, and they're not on Facebook, we want to get that in front of them. And also, people may only be looking at one platform at a time. So in occasion, we also issue news releases too and try to get the story out to the media. So we're using every asset we have to try to get our story out there.
Great, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, feel free to interrupt me if you have
another question that is my question as well, is what kind of internet connection do you have from space so that you can do Hangouts? And the one that really got me was, well, besides space, but underwater. I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, so the space one is interesting. So you have, they use KU band antenna on the space station, and we have downlink slots. So you need to have a good passover and connectivity from space. And that actually is routed back to the ground, and we basically just hook that ground access, that ground video feed coming in, into a computer. And it's that simple. And then that computer is accessed right into the Hangout. So the technology allows us, which never before was really there, allows us to connect people from space right into a laptop, which, just going back in time a couple years, we couldn't do anything like that. In fact, we go back even 3 years, we didn't even have internet access on the space station. So, but we don't use internet. There's no Wi-Fi floating around the space station where the astronauts are connecting. When we do it, when you're doing a connection with space, they don't actually see you. It's just one-way video coming down from space station. So it's actually, they're not on a Hangout per se. We're taking that video feed, and it's audio only for them. Did that answer the question?
Yes, it's just so remarkable that you're able to do that, and that right here in New York City, sometimes we can't get a decent connection with our internet providers. It's kind of sad.
BL, can I ask a quick clarification?
Absolutely.
So you're saying that the astronauts, when they're in space, they don't actually see the Hangout. They just hear the Hangout. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. They only hear the participants feeding questions in through the Hangout tool. The reason is that because they're not like looking at a laptop. We probably could do something like that on space station, but the reliability would be very low. The internet access can come and go.
The upload to go that far up, I guess, is kind of the issue.
Yeah, I mean, it takes an awful lot of bandwidth to access something like that. That's why our KU band antenna video downlink feed we use for all of our television assets. It's the same thing. We're just plugging into the Hangout.
Okay, and just to follow up with what BL was starting, when you're underwater, are you actually using cables, wires to do that?
Underwater, you're asking a good question. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they actually had Wi-Fi underwater. They were access on the Aquanauts.
They appear to be sitting around a computer.
Yep, they had a
Yeah.
laptop. They
They
had
were
a
looking at.
computer.
I'm curious for both you and Sona as to how big your social media team is and how many of those people are involved in producing Hangouts or participating.
For us at the NYT, our social media team is made up of about 5 people. There are social media editors who work on specific desks. I work with the national desk and all of features. And for the Google Hangouts, we were talking about, or we're talking myself, a video editor who was handling sort of all the technical aspect of everything. Myself, I was handling the production aspect, so choosing the participants, making sure that our guests were, had all the right equipment. And then, I had my manager who was involved too, just to make sure that, everything was sort of on track. And then, of course, the dining reporter and the dining editor who were making sure that they had everything on their end, like the right questions that they wanted to ask the experts and everything. So it was, quite a big production, and I do, recommend creating schedules and task lists for these Google Hangouts. I think it's very important.
I have certainly seen Hangouts when you really could not follow because they were not prepared. So I agree with you 100%. Being prepared and having an outline and having your questions in advance is all part of producing any type of interactive event. And there's 2 sides to this. There's one side where it's too tight and it's too much like a television production and there's no interactivity, which is pretty much what happened yesterday when Tiffany did their first ever Hangout, and they had wonderful production value, they had great lighting, they had great sound, but they unfortunately did not have live participation by the viewers. I'm sure that will change as they go forward. So there's a lot to consider, and the fact that you have a team must make it better. And just a comment I wanted to share that Joy Abella says she attended the NASA Star Trek Hangout and it totally blew her mind. I think that many people have found that when they've seen iconic brands and government agencies involved in this technology, that I think their first element is surprise, and then after that, you must go to your own company and go, well, why can't we do that? And I wonder what the answer is. But John, what prompted the decision to try Hangouts?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, you're really looking for ways to connect with the public. And for NASA, we look at the digital tools. And so there's so many out there. I see a lot of companies and organizations just jump into whatever the latest thing is. We actually take our time and we evaluate them. It wasn't quickly that we did it. We actually took a little time to get on Google+. There's a process in government for doing it. But we were eager for this idea of having this video connection with people. There's other types of software out there you can do similar things, but nothing quite like a Hangout where one thing we did, BL, which is interesting, is you used to have, let's say there's a science announcement for one of our missions, you'd have the people all over the country would fly into NASA headquarters for a news conference. And that costs the agency quite a bit of money in travel, and then there's this big TV production. So we actually did, last year, we did our first news conference Google Plus Hangout, where people could just be from their offices in front of their laptops, participating in announcements. So we saw a real need here to connect not only the public with us in a different way, but also news media.
I'm curious to know what kind of training you give to the people who participate in Hangouts. Do you get them together in a class, or how do you show people how it works?
Well, if you go to, we have a Slideshare page. If you go to NASA Slideshare, you'll see there's actually our Google Plus Hangout slides on there for training. It's really, we give it internally to folks, but anyone viewing right now can go there and check it out. So we do have those products and those assets available, but one thing happens sometimes, we don't have a lot of lead time for trainings, so and also the scientists will get thrown into something. So we actually have we have an email with all the things you need to know that go out to all the participants in our Hangout. So we send that out usually like 48 hours in advance, and we try to do a practice run with them a day before. and then also want them online about an hour before so we can work on any glitches. We've had a couple failures, Google. I wouldn't call them failures. We've had ones with glitches where there's audio issues or there's connectivity issues. And if you just understand the platform and you accept that as a possibility that can happen, it's okay. But it can be really frustrating at times because you are sort of you're at the mercy of the technology.
I have spoken with companies who will, in fact, Google will do this. If you are going to be in a Hangout with Google, they will send you lights. They will send you a headset. Do you do that with the people who participate with you? I think from what you said to us, you do at the Times.
We've done that before, yeah. Google has worked with us on a couple of Hangouts. One time they sent a crew, and that was great. We had some great and we were able to really sort of nail down our best practices after that Hangout. And to touch on your point about training, we do something similar to what John was saying, which is we bring in our dining reporter a day before, not only so we can get her in the right lighting and we can make sure she's sort of comfortable with the subject, but also we give her some access to the participants that we've chosen as well. That sort of goes back to the pre-production thing and losing a little bit of the spontaneity, but we've learned that we at least want her to know who the people are. She doesn't need to necessarily have a 1 hour long conversation with them the day before the Hangout, but it has helped so that she's not spending too much time just getting to know the people when we've actually gone live with the Hangout and that we have it linked on the New York Times homepage. So.
It's one of the reasons that we open the green room before we do what we call the green room. We open the Hangout before we make it live so that everybody can meet and talk to each other and make sure that they like their lower third and their lighting and just so that we've actually spoken to each other. But I wonder if, John and Sona, if you could each address what your possibly top 3 pieces of advice to companies who are considering using Hangouts would be. Would you like to tell us, John?
I could start. Yeah, you mentioned the Star Trek Hangout earlier. It was that actually we did work with Google on that, and it was a big production. We had cast members from the movie, the most recent Star Trek movie that came out, and they were connecting directly with the space station. It was a really fun event, but it was also a production, which we talked about earlier. And we're trying to do things low cost, easy to do events. So I think the piece of advice I'd give is don't let the production stuff overwhelm you. I mean, it's really the Hangout tool is pretty simple. Once you get the hang of it, it's not overly complex. You need you need these things like good internet connectivity, ideally hardwired and not relying on Wi-Fi. And you want to make sure you have good microphones, and you want to make sure that you have and engaging content. I watch a lot of these are an hour long, and they put me to sleep, frankly. Hopefully this one isn't doing that to people watching. But sometimes there just can be a little drowned out, boring, almost like a news conference where people are just talking and then it goes to the next person. I think my advice is try to make them as engaging as possible with visuals and take away from just talking heads on your screen a little bit. That makes a big difference. And the last piece of advice I'd give people is, don't get intimidated by the technology. It's you might have some problems here or there. There might be audio issues, but I think anyone watching at home gets that. It's not the kind of thing. They'll be okay with the mistakes that you'll make, and it'll be easier going forward.
I love that advice. I really do love that advice. And I could not agree with you more about the fact that being an expert doesn't make someone a good presenter. And, this does not just apply to Hangouts. I mean, this is guests on radio shows. This is just guests in general, people who speak at conferences. What I tell people is make sure that if you're having a guest, you've heard them speak, that that person is able to present themselves, interestingly in public. What would you tell us, Sona, about what would you advise to companies that are thinking of trying it? I think you've given some of it, which is, don't overproduce, but what other things would you advise them?
Yeah, a lot of my advice I echo John with a lot of what he said. I would also, really think about what is the idea? What exactly do you want to do? Think about that with your team. Is it a sort of utility-driven? Do you want to invite an expert to answer questions? Is it features? Is it news? Like, what is it? What are you going to offer? And I agree about the talking heads thing. Think about long-term as well. With Google Hangouts, we're talking about appointment viewing. If I'm working a job, I may not have time to participate in a Google Hangout in the middle of the afternoon in my office. So, but perhaps it's a subject that I'm interested in that I will watch later when I'm at home and have some time. Will I want to sit through, you know, an archived 15-minute video or 20-minute video, whatever it is, of just talking heads? So think about, you know, what could have a longer shelf life that you think would bring value to your audience. I would definitely echo myself when I say definitely figure out the logistics ahead of time, come up with task lists, make sure everybody knows what they're supposed to do. We've been burned a couple of times because we forgot something. Maybe one of our guests, Google Hangout, guests participating from another state, and they didn't have the proper, a splitter, so the two people couldn't participate with, they'd have to use one set of headphones, and you've got one person with one earbud and then the other person with the other earbud, and it just looks really funny. But had we thought about that in advance, we would have been able to sort of figure out those details. So once you start a Hangout, and you plan more for the future, come up with your task list and make sure that you're thinking about those things for future Hangouts. And then finally, don't forget the promotion aspect as well. I mean, sometimes I would get so caught up in picking the guests and picking the topic and making sure that we had everything in place, but I would really forget about the simple ways to promote my Hangout in advance of my video chat. So make sure that's sort of part of the workflow as well.
What are some of the ways that you have each promoted your Hangouts in advance? Well, obviously with the New York Times you have a huge platform and a huge audience, but have you used multiple channels, or what have you done that let people know? And also, one of the things that we find is that we have to tell people how to watch, and because people don't realize how to watch. So what have you done to let people know how to come in?
Here at the Times, we've used Google+. We have a Google+ page, so we've promoted it there. We've promoted it on Facebook using Facebook events. The Facebook calendar. So we would create an event for our Google Hangout, and that way our Facebook fans would know about it. We would ask our experts, so non-NYT people, to promote it on their social channels as well, and ask them to put it on their website and point people to either our Facebook page, or we would always put it in an article page on our site. So we would ask our experts to point to that, and they would always be good sports about it. And of course, our dining writer, we'd ask her to promote it. She has a big following, and sometimes we would reach out to what we now call influencers, people who for dining it was influential bloggers in the dining space, and we would tell them about it and ask them if they would be interested in promoting it. And because it was a useful sort of utility-driven thing, that a lot of them say, absolutely, I'd be happy to. So.
Well, a lot of our audience today are communications professionals, and the advice that you just gave is so very important because, Hangouts aren't a strategy, Google Plus isn't a strategy, Twitter's not a strategy, but when you put all of those things together, plus the power of an iconic brand, it's sort of hard to imagine how you could fail. What were you going to say, Natan?
I was just going to say we got a really interesting question leading up to, and it made me think of it, Sona, when you were talking about the fact that it's really important to create content that people are going to watch later. So someone asked, what's a good way to use Hangouts for B2B lead generation? It's a really kind of interesting thing because I think, it's obvious in general you need really good content, but especially for companies that aren't just necessarily interested in viewers, but actually using this to get email addresses or signups or just interested in what they're doing. Does anyone here have advice for how to do that?
Well, I can comment. First, I want to just answer your last question, BL. You had one thing, just two quick things that we do. The event page function on Google Plus allows you to put a video in there, which hopefully this is running on right now on the event page, but you can also put a preview video. And so one thing we do is we try to put something like an engaging NASA YouTube video into the event page to kind of get a little bit more excitement about what we're going to talk about, give some background information we're talking about. And then we also put it on our websites. You know, NASA.gov is a huge website for us, gets a ton of traffic, and we put on a ticker up there highlighting the event. So we put it on other channels besides just social media, so I just wanted to address that. You know, these events can be really, you're right, we do things in NASA particularly, we do things that are too long. We're trying to create a video that captures people's imaginations, and they're an hour long, or some of these videos we put out are 20 minutes. No one's going to sit in front of their TV typically, or their screen rather, and watch something for 20 minutes. And you have to be really committed to a broadcast that long, let alone an hour. So sometimes just taking those little bites, those little sound bites out makes a huge difference, and that's really something we're working toward as NASA, as an agency, is doing more video editing. What is that one thing that someone said in our Hangout or in our news conference, that one thing that we want to take out, and we could maybe make a Instagram clip out of it, or we can make a Vine video out of some of these points that we have. So we try to condense things into little sound bites that connect what our message is, what our story is. You know, there's a launch, it's at 7 o'clock, tune in here, boom, boom, boom. And instead of talking about what the launch is, what the payload is, that when you start talking too much, you're going to drown out and lose your audience and just saturate them with too much information.
That's a very, very important point. You know, as has been mentioned here, there are an awful lot of shows that are an hour long, and who has the time to watch 10 of them in a day? I mean, nobody does. And one of the things that Ronnie does so well is to pull out the nuggets into shorter videos, and what we both do is to timestamp the videos so that people can go directly to, and we'll do that to this one afterward, so people can go directly to a segment that they're interested in. And that, I think, is where Hangouts are going, that they're just going to keep getting shorter unless they're in fact training and actual instruction, or in the case of a product demonstration video, however long it takes to do that and to take the interactive questions that come out of that. But the idea that every Hangout should be an hour long or a half an hour long is kind of, I don't know where that came from. Somebody did it and then everybody started to do it, but this is going to get down to the same thing as segments in TV. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes tops, you know, and that's what's going to happen. And that's going to force us all to get much more interesting, which is really important. We have some questions that I think are of interest, and one of them was, if I can find it, how at NASA the engineers and the astronauts use Hangouts internally. Are you using them for internal communication as well? And I would also like to know that about the New York Times.
They have been done internally that are off the Hangout on Air feature. Folks have done that, certainly. Again, it's something that really helps you connect to people easily, no matter where you are on the planet. I think the Hangout, which makes the Hangout feature that's unique, is the fact you can do it on air. You can it's playing on YouTube right now, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so unique. There are so many other types of technologies out there that let you do video conferencing. So they do it engineers, scientists, managers, they do use Google Plus Hangouts on occasion, but that's not our primary mission and activities we do with it as an agency.
For those in our audience who are new to Hangouts, everything that Google has, which includes Drive and Analytics and spreadsheets and every single email, really, you can share your screen, you're able to interact in real-time live in collaboration via Hangouts with all of these tools, and there really is nothing else that does that and does it well, especially not with as many people as you can bring into a Hangout. We could have 15 people right now participating live in this Hangout. Try that in Skype. Try that with more than 3 people and see what happens to your video and sound quality. It just doesn't work. And also these are recorded automatically to a connected YouTube channel, and after the fact you can then go to that video, you can edit it, you can search optimize it, you can brand it, you can cut it into other little nuggets and present those for people who are interested in specific areas. It's a very feature-rich platform, so I hope we're encouraging you guys to give it a try.
BL, just one quick thing. You know, one of my favorite Hangouts at NASA is we were told they were doing this operational parachute test out in Yuma, Arizona, in the desert. and we were told it was no way we could get television coverage out there for it. And it's kind of a big deal. It's our new spacecraft that's going to take humans into deep space eventually, and the testing parachutes is a big operational milestone for us. And for the public not to see that, normally it's as a government agency, we want to put that stuff out there. It's our obligation almost to put it out there so reporters can look at us, we can talk about it. And the Hangout, we did it. We had connectivity, so we did a live Google Plus Hangout showing the drop test, the parachute being deployed and everything live on video through Hangout. So it solved the problem for us, and that's something you could think about too, where you want TV assets, they may not be available, but you do have connectivity.
Connectivity
had a really interesting question come in that I thought I'd share just because everyone talked about it a bit. But this is for both, both Sona and John, and maybe Sona, you can kick it off. But when you were first doing these Hangouts, did you run into any institutional resistance to kind of sell it through? Did it require lots of meetings or presentations? And what advice do you have for others?
Yeah, sure. So, I've been at the New York Times for 2 years, so I will confess I was not here when the Times did its first Hangout. But I can talk. I mean, there was still institutional sort of a little bit of pushback when when I did my first one here in 2012, late 2012, and it was just we at the Times like everything to be very Timesian, meaning everything should be very produced, everything should look polished and professional, and there was a big hesitation of putting people live on air without really being able to produce the video first. And we're talking about linking to a Google Hangout on the New York Times homepage, and when we go live, it's whatever goes at that point, even though we've done rehearsals. But the pushback that I gave and that the social team gave was, we have to try these things. We have to sort of take part in a new method of communication that our readers are interested in. And if we don't experiment, we don't know what's going to happen. And we are, I don't know if there are a lot of media people in this Hangout, but maybe you have heard about the innovation report, and to address some of those points in the innovation report, that we need to do more experimentation and we need to be in a culture of experimentation. And so, the editors were willing to try it, and they said, okay, let's give it a shot and let's see how it goes. So I would really suggest that you say the same thing, that with all of these platforms, with Facebook, with Twitter, with live chats, with Q&As, all these things, we don't know what's going to happen, but we're never going to know if we don't try. So that's what the advice that I would give.
I think that a lot of brands are afraid of trying, and I guess let me just ask this question quickly. Who ultimately owns the content? Do you own it? Does YouTube end up owning it? Who owns the content?
I mean, that's a good question. I want to say that we do. It's it's a video that we've produced, but it's being hosted on a third-party site. So I'm not sure.
You own the content.
Relatively easy
because you're legally
actually download the video from your YouTube channel. I don't know if that's what you were going to mention, Ronnie, but I think that's an issue we had when we were starting to do Hangouts, where editing them can often become an issue if you don't want to do it via YouTube. YouTube has some pretty neat editing tools, but if you really wanted to add some interesting graphics to it, the quickest way we found to do it was just to rip the video, which essentially means downloading some free app to be able to grab the video, and since it's yours, like you said, Sona, just editing it and putting it right back up on YouTube.
Yeah, and I'd say you, the person that's run the Hangout on Air, actually owns the content, because primarily you're legally responsible for it. You could get in trouble if there was copyright materials, etc., that are shown during that Hangout. Therefore, you're responsible. You are the owner.
In many of our Hangouts, too, like with these dining Hangouts, we have piped in B-roll during the Hangouts, and that video was shot by us as well. So.
You have to be careful, though, because YouTube will take even your own video, and when you use it in your own video, and you may get a copyright strike. And we know several people who've been involved in those issues, and they're horrible issues. So you do have to be very, very careful that you do own your own information. Scott Scowcroft is asking, John, in the comments afterwards, could you please provide a link to the parachute test hangout? And absolutely, that would be great.
No problem.
Yeah.
Also, all of our Hangouts are on the on the NASA Google Plus event pages. So you can see all the ones we've done if you want to revisit them. And we've embedded the video in every one of our event pages.
Yeah, just so we don't forget this question, a few other people were asking about the B2B component. So I'm not sure if either of you had done that before, but is there any good way to generate leads by doing Hangouts when the goal is less? Either you've had to generate great content and you're more just a business looking to create leads. Is that something that you guys think could work? And if so, do you have any tips on how to do that?
Content, content, content. And Hangouts are not a strategy. Google Plus is not a strategy. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but you need to have a comprehensive, integrative strategy in which you say things that are interesting to people. And Seth Godin said it better than anybody's ever said it. He said it in one sentence. You have to tell people not just what you want to tell them, but what they want to hear. And that's a strategy.
I guess more specifically, though, I mean, even if you are doing that, how can you generate leads from that?
I've got some ideas. I'll throw out just some simple ones. If you know what your clients are looking for, meaning the business that you service, then answer their questions. FAQs, frequently asked questions, are phenomenally done in Hangout. You can have other people that are part of your team in your business answer for their particular department. Now, you might end up having a 15, 20-minute Hangout, but like we talked about before, each one of those questions could be sliced and diced into its own individual video later on. And you can also use those individual answers as a teaser to get people to come right back and watch the whole thing so they can see all of that content. And then repurpose those videos on your website so it ties into the FAQ and you're telling people go to our website to see the rest of this. So you're driving traffic towards your website.
And that is what not just B2B, but any communications professional has to be looking at. I mean, I've been doing communications for brands for a lot of years, and I fail to see the difference, frankly, between promoting B2B and promoting B2C. It's all about telling people what they need to know and helping them with content that they want to hear. And, driving traffic to your site and knowing what you're trying to accomplish, I think is what both John and Sona have talked about in their strategies here, is that you have to decide what you want to accomplish, who you want to reach. I don't think you do exactly the same hangout, for example, to school children as you do to engineers. I don't think that you do exactly the same content in your cooking hangouts as you do when you have Secretary of State Kerry in the hangout. So it's really, it's content.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think one of the big things that could also help businesses a lot, and I'd be curious if John or Sona, you ever considered doing this, is a lot of the times when someone's trying to literally generate business leads, it's very important to get an email address. But via the Google event page, there's no built-in form to grab email addresses, even when people want to give them to you. So one really neat way to kind of solve that, which is what we did for this Hangout too, is just to create a simple form, whether you do it on Google, your own website, Wufoo, and just instead of just tweeting the link to the actual Hangout page, you share a link to the form where people fill it out, and then afterwards they get emailed the link instantly. And then those email addresses can funnel into your system the way any others would. And instead of it just being a PDF that you spend hours creating, like you said, BL, it could be really good content.
Just a little bit of housekeeping. The hashtag for this event is #HangoutStrategy. You can leave your questions in 140 characters or less, including that hashtag, on Twitter. We are tracking them. You can leave your questions on the Google Plus event page, and you can also leave them on the YouTube watch page, and we are doing our best to track them, and we'll answer as many of them as possible during the Hangout. Scott Scowcroft is asking whether either of you met internal resistance from management when wanting to try this new technology, and I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, from our management perspective, they actually got us on a digital originally. We have the deputy director of communications was like one of the first people at NASA to embrace technology, and so we've been very fortunate there. I know the question was asked earlier about others, has there been resistance, and absolutely, we had, for any time we try something new, our communication specialists have to think differently about how they do their jobs, which can be challenging at NASA. We have people that have been doing the same sort of work, issuing a press release, putting on a press conference, putting out talking points. They've been doing that work for 20 plus years. Having them think differently about new technologies and how it can reach an audience can be a big shift for them. So that's been challenging, and it's still ongoing for us. And then the other thing, of course, is scientists, engineers, convincing them, hey, you're not going to be at a news conference on a dais anymore. You're going to be on your laptop in your office. There is definitely resistance there. What you have to do is show the value. What are you getting from this? Not only you're not traveling, are the media still telling your story? And if we did the news conference on a Google Plus Hangout and there were no stories or very few stories printed the next day and there weren't many reporters on, then we would have done our jobs, and they would have said, we're not doing this again. So it's really, the onus was on us to make it successful, to make sure reporters participated, and we added a phone bridge right into the Hangout where they were calling in just like they would a news conference, just like they would a teleconference. So it works well if you show and demonstrate value, but initially there's been pushback on almost every time we introduce a new technology into the way we do business.
To NASA, the kings of technology. I'm astounded.
I want to add one more thing too that I think is really important with Hangout strategies in general. Excuse me. Here at NYT, we're very used to pushing information out. We are a newspaper. That's what newspapers have traditionally done. We write the news and we push it out and we just let people consume it, and that's it. And one of the things that we sort of communicated to management was, we really need to rely on readers to tell us what their experiences are consuming our content. So, for example, with these dining hangouts that we've been doing, it wasn't just inviting readers to talk to Julia Moskin, our New York Times dining reporter, and Mario Batali, the star chef. Here's your opportunity to just meet them, and lucky you. But it was really just, we picked readers who cooked our recipe, who spent time doing that, and the whole premise of the Recipe Lab concept and the Recipe Lab Hangout was we wanted to hear from readers what they had to say and what they thought of the recipe and what they thought about how we presented the recipe. And same thing for other features. We have a wine school column by our wine critic Eric Asimov, who every month he picks a wine and he tells readers to buy it and drink it and tell him what they think about it. And that's probably going to be a hangout that we do where we invite wine drinkers to join our wine critic to talk about his selections. And the whole concept of that column is really, it's based off what readers say. It's not really what the New York Times says. So, we've communicated that to our leaders and our editors and saying this is no longer just, us wanting to have people participate in a video chat, with us where we do most of the talking, but we really want our readers to engage and contribute to us, and they understood the value of it because more and more, New York Times readers are playing a huge part in influencing our coverage, and Hangouts and other forms of social media are very important to that.
I think that that's a sea change in journalism, really. And, there's a show that I watch on New York One sometimes where New York Times reporters talk about the news of the week. And it's just fascinating to get that kind of behind-the-scenes look, as I'm finding it fascinating to hear your experiences today, and from the comments, so are other people. And I know I'm going to butcher this name, but I really want to bring up this question. Tiffany, I hope I don't screw up your name, Tiffany. I'm just going to go with Tiffany. But talking about Hangouts as being a tactic and not a strategy. And the reason I want to make sure to highlight this question is because this is the person who created, her agency created Communications Week, and who thought that this Hangout was something that should be part of it. So thank you for that, and so happy to know that there is this kind of interest as part of Communications Week in New York now. And I am really fascinated with the fact that there was still pushback from management after the successes that came in the earliest ones. I wonder what the plans are going forward in terms of how you may change the way that you use Hangouts or expand upon them. May I ask you first, John?
Sure. We used to do, there was one point where my colleague Jason and I, we were looking at our calendar and we had literally 6 Hangouts in 1 week. It became the thing to do. And so we're trying to be more strategic about it. We're trying to say, is this worthy of doing? Is there something else you can do to tell your story? Hey, this might work better for Reddit AMA. So we're trying to pull people back, actually, from Hangouts. Sometimes you look at your viewer count and you'll be like, I can't believe there are so few viewers on here with this content. So it can't be the end all be all, like you said, on strategy, digital strategy, social strategy, comm strategy. But what it can be is one of the many tools you use. So we're trying to have an array of different resources available to people and maybe lead them to the one that's right for their event or their topic. So you look at our calendar now. It would be, maybe a couple a month we're doing. So, and we're being more strategic. We're more careful. We're thinking of the products we want to incorporate into them. So we're not throwing them together as quickly as we could. At NASA, sometimes people will just all run and do something because everyone's doing it in comm. And so we just need to be more strategic. And that's one thing that we're really working toward. We're not giving up on Hangouts by any means, but we want to do them in a more planned out fashion than we had prior to this.
Makes total sense. How about at the New York Times?
I would say a lot of similar things as well. I mean, the conversations that have done well for us in the past, the conversations meaning the Hangouts, are the ones where we invite some high-profile guests and give our readers access to them. And I think we too are going to want to be very strategic and say, okay, is this guest and is this topic really worthy of a Hangout? And if so, then we're definitely going to put the effort into it. And we've learned that from the past that for Recipe Lab, for example, the most popular cookbooks that are out there right now, those and those cookbook authors, those are the Hangouts that have performed the best for us. And so, thinking about exclusive content, thinking about really, what people are going to tune into, and I think that's going to play a big role in our strategy as well. What's most useful? What are people interested in? And we also might crowdsource ideas for the Hangouts as well. If we told our dining readers, if you were to join a Google Hangout with the New York Times, who would you want to see in it? A star
What an interesting idea. I mean, that just makes so much sense. Asking to crowdsourcing your Hangouts. I hope that will happen. We are seeing some very good suggestions about how to magnify the impact of Hangouts after the fact. And to the point that you made, John, that not that many people may be watching the live Hangout, and to the point that you made before, Sona, that people don't necessarily have time during the day when they're at work, and Ronnie can address this, we have seen that the majority of Hangouts are not watched in real time. The majority of Hangouts are, I think Ronnie will tell you, is like 70% are watched after the fact. So that's another reason why we like to include the questions on the screen when we do them, so that the participation is clear. But Bruce McCallum is saying that it's great to create a library of content from the HOAs, and that's absolutely one of the valuable points of it, especially when you break them down into the smaller nuggets. But Ronnie, could you address how many people said, I believe it was your survey, said that they watch Hangouts not in real time?
I don't remember the number exactly, but it's true the majority do not watch it in real time, but I do have a solution for that. Because I believe one of the unique values or the unique sales proposition of what this Hangout tool does is the ability to be live and have interaction while you're live. And I think a lot of brands are honestly afraid of that or don't know how to make it work. And because of that, I think that's where the majority of people are just not tuning in live, because why should I? Why do I need to watch this live? I can watch it later. If you can change things so that they do get extra value by watching live, by doing what we're doing right now, bringing interactive comments right into the show, like Sarah Hill says, she's my hero for the Hangout world, she said people could yell at the TV, and the TV can answer back. So that's the part, I think, that really sets us apart and would encourage people, and I've seen it work for myself, encourage people to watch live. Of course, you got to find the right time, right? So that's the big struggle. When's the right time to do all this stuff? But when you start building an audience and you don't use some of the tools that take away the commenting, you build the ability for people to ask questions, and we can bring answers right into the show. They're part of the show, even though they're not necessarily inside this area on the bottom, that film strip thing. So I think that part is what's missing for a lot of brands, and it's a place where you can really gain a leg up on your competition if you start being more live and interactive with your viewers.
I could not agree more with that one, and I
that
think
just came in that's relevant to that. I'll pull it up. They wanted to know, Alyssa wanted to know, is that she sees the viewers section on the right, but after a Hangout, is there a way to tell the total number of people that joined? And maybe to add to that, if we have a minute or two, John or Sona, how do you report back success on your Hangouts? John, I know you mentioned that viewers are sometimes low, so what tips do you have for reporting success or lack of success when it comes to being done with the Hangout?
Well, that last question, I mean, that's all in the eye of the beholder and how you want to judge success. Because like Ronnie said, people do watch it afterward. If you just show those initial numbers, sometimes it can be a bit disappointing, at least from our point of view. I don't know what Sona's experience is. Depends on the event. We do one live from space. The numbers were awesome. We do one with a smaller mission no one's ever heard of. It's harder to draw an audience. So the analytics are all there. YouTube provides them, how many of the views, and Google does as well. So that helps us. You accumulate those statistics. We put them in a report and we send it out. And people ask us, sometimes you're confused, like, why didn't I get more viewers? We did all the right things. We put up on nasa.gov, but you have to remember these things. What's nice about Hangouts, they don't live in the moment. Ronnie was talking about how great it is the real engagement. That's true, but there's another element to it that does get to live on afterward. It is a YouTube link that you can keep sharing, and if you want to, like I said, one thing I think's worked well is breaking into the key sound bites so people can kind of get rid of all the muck that's in there, the introductions and the closures and all that stuff, and just hit the main points. So that's one of the ways that we kind of work that with our audience, our admission projects programs we support.
To address that question, though, about whether people that are viewing are knowable by the host, the answer is no. We are sort of in this world of Big Brother, but it's not quite to there yet. We can't tell who's actually watching, but
Right.
You can tell who's commented. And this brings me back to, and I'm not by any means disparaging the idea that the video lives on. Of course it lives on, and that's one of the most important values. But what you can do to separate yourself is gain an interactive activity or an interactive audience. And you can reward those people because you can tell who are the ones that have been commenting. And then you can mention them and you can bring their comments right onto the screen. So when you do slice it into a smaller piece, they're featured. Now all of a sudden they've become a raving fan where they were just a fan before because they were part of the show. And so they're going to tell other people, hey, check this out next time. And they will help you build your audience.
that's why you see, people standing when there's a camera and they're photobombing because they just, the hi mom thing. They just want to be part of it. Everybody does really want to be part of it. And Joan Stewart has made a good suggestion here. At the end of the Hangout, let people know that you're going to offer them something, a checklist, a cheat sheet, a short email course in exchange for their email address. People are not just going to give up their email address, that's for sure. And I went through the list of email addresses, and there were more than one Mickey Mouse on it. So, I don't think that's the end-all and the be-all of how to get engagement, but it's certainly you want to know that, and there are things that you can offer that will expand the reach of it.
Yeah, we used to, or we do, when we do the dining hangouts, we would offer a copy of the cookbook to the hangout participants, and we would also, for people who just can't join the hangout or they can't watch the video or they don't watch video online, we still sometimes try to extract some of the best tips and things that were talked about, and we promote that on Facebook and we promote it on Twitter. If, let's say, the chef expert chef has something great to say and offers a great cooking tip, it's something that we will tweet out live, and we saw a lot of success in that as well. The sort of little tweetable items are great for video clips, but they're also great for other social networks as well. And you know, you could even write a follow-up article, or you could post something that extracts the most important points of the Hangout. And that way, you're giving access to people who just don't watch video online. And for our readership, sometimes there's few people who don't. So I like to build that into the strategy as well.
Thank you so much. We have reached the top of the hour, and we're going to stop. I want, once again, to thank you so much, John Yembrick from NASA, Natan from Muckrack, and Ronnie Binzer, the Hangout helper, and Sona Patel, the social media editor of the New York Times. We will do our best to answer some of these questions in the event page, but I see among the questions, I see a reason for more than one additional Hangout to address some of the topics that have come up in the questions that really weren't part of what we were doing here today. So thank you for those, and thank you to those of you who joined us. We hope that we've been helpful, and we wish you a great rest of the week. The video will be time-stamped, and it will appear on this page and on YouTube as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.